thinking, Phil, I think, see, I think in 71, 2, 3, 4, I was in high school. So it had to be 70, 69, 68, and 67.
Yeah.
My dad, Frank Leland, was able to get me a permit because he was good friends with Jerry Purcell. And Jerry Purcell and Gary Upham are the ones that built the Pursuit in their backyard. So they had bought barges, and they had a barge called the Californian, and they had a barge called the Seacoaster. And that's where I got my start.
And a lot of people think you don't catch crap on a barge.
Yeah.
Man, you guys caught all kinds of stuff.
And I'm telling you, out on the barge, we had days where we caught giant Spanish mackerel, 3 to 4 or 5 pound Spanish mackerel. You could catch the little rat yellowtail. Mm-hmm. You had certain spots where the barge were anchored where you'd catch halibut, you'd catch the whitefish, you'd catch the Johnny bass, you'd catch the salmon groupers. You had days, most of all the time, you could catch 3 to 5 pound bonita, and bonita up to 10 pounds. I remember I had a picture in Western Outdoors of 10 pound bonita, and it wasn't that uncommon. It was pretty common. I was holding it like this with my deck boots on, my big old deck boots and no shirt back in the day, and you had a little hat you'd wear, and it was just, fun fishing. I remember too, like you would fillet fish when I was working there. Then I changed the rules, but filleting fish was, you'd bring a gunny sack over and it was a tip to whatever you gave me. Well, after about 3 or 4 quarters, when I'm working, this is going to change. We're going to be 10 cents a fish. We're going to put it in a fillet bag, and we're going to get them all done, So that got that figured out and stuff. But honestly, God, we'd have days on the halibut. You wouldn't catch a whole bunch, but you would have anywhere from 2 to 10 halibut, and they averaged over 25 pounds. And the feat to get that halibut gaffed, you had to gaff them with a 16-foot gaff, and to get that fish in there, because they were using these landing nets, like a crab net, and you imagine trying to put a halibut in there, So we had trips where you could catch, 7, 8, 9, 10. I still have pictures of my house on the back black and white Polaroid of guys holding up 25-pound, 30-pound halibut. But the craziest thing that ever happened to me, back in the day, we used to catch crabs on these little star traps. You remember those?
I do. I used to
So
do that.
it was a trap that was square, but it had arms and a little pivot thing in there. So when you pulled it, you would put a mackerel in there, and you'd pull it, and it would string up like that, and then we'd put it on the rail and pull it up. And we were anchored in anywhere from 100 to 200 feet of water. And I could catch enough crabs throughout the day to everybody to enjoy some. And they were the rock crabs, and they had like sizes like that up to that. And you could catch throughout the day maybe 80 crabs a day. And that's when the limit was like 35. And we had a couple crew members, and you were allowed to keep that many. But one day, one of the cook's sons was on the boat. He was going to help me work on the boat, And I'm pulling my crab trap, and I can't pull it. It's heavier than heck. So I'm pulling on this crab trap, He gets it right up to about that far from the bottom, and there's a halibut, a 35-pound halibut, like this, stuck in the trap sideways like that. And I'm going, if that halibut kicks, he's going to break my trap and he's going to get away. So I get that, and that's when I learned how to gaff a halibut. Whenever you gaff a halibut, you want to get the 2 pectoral fins right at the gut where this belly is, that little round spot right there. And then if you can, the perfect gaff would be hook the pectorals right where that round piece of bone is right there, and it hangs right in there. And when you gaff them, just lift it up nice and slow, but steady. And whatever you do, don't bounce it off the gaff. So what we try to do is you lift it up gently, and you try to put something on in his eyes like that, and hold him down. But we get this halibut, and I gaff it, everything's perfect. Right when I gaff the fish, he flops, and the crab trap, one of the ropes broke. And I got him on the gaff only. So I got to get him up there 16 feet. I get him up in the barge, and everybody's like, oh my gosh, look at the size of this halibut on the crab trap, Well, Kenny Englehart was the barge master in them days. Okay. And in the old days, the captain got whatever he wanted. So right out the gate, hey, Ed, give me that halibut. I'm going to go to the fish board here for a few minutes, and I'll be right back. So right off the back, he gets the best white chunk, the white side.
When you get down here,
and those fillets, their loins about that big, He's, okay, Sonny, now it's your fish. You can take care. And I'm thinking to myself, man, I feel kind of bad, but he's the captain, and you know what? I got plenty of halibut. I can't eat that much halibut. I'm glad that made Kenny happen. He had a great time. Kenny Englehart, he was an Indian guy.
That's good.
And he worked on that barge for years and years and years. And
You
they
had
had
some good fishing out there, right?
Yeah, I've had some good fishing out there.
Yeah.
I was a lot younger, obviously.
yeah, you'd fish rockcod with a chrome sinker and a hook about 20 inches away, almost like we used to fish albacore in the old days. So like a Carolina rig with a sinker up high, you know.
Yeah.
And man,
It worked.
you could catch Johnny bass, whitefish, salmon groupers, all kinds of different species. It was really fun.
What about sablefish?
Oh yeah, then we got time for the sable story.
Yeah. Heck yeah.
I forget the exact year. I'm thinking it had to be 68 or 69.
Before me.
On the barge, California, there were these sablefish. And the barge would hold 250 people. It was 200 feet long. And it was an old lumber barge. It was orange.
Yeah. Yeah.
Orange and white.
California, right?
California.
Yeah.
They had the California 1, which they sunk over there in San Pedro, in that graveyard over there where they by the bubble hole where all those boats had been sunk. And then they brought this other one. And what it was is I think there was either Washington or wherever the wood comes from. Once the barge was unable to keep carrying wood, transfer wood, it was taken out of its license, and they'd make barges out of them. Well, back in the old days, they wouldn't insure these barges, and they would just run them till they sunk. So that's why they had so many different barges and stuff. And they had 2 anchors, so the barges would anchor both this way. Well, one year we're fishing sable, and I'm telling you, like all these guys talk about how much they pay for this blackcod and all this stuff. I might be wrong in the exact dates, but we got limits of sable night and day. I want to say for 2 months solid. It was the most wide open sable fishing you ever
What
seen
is
in
the
your life.
limit? 10?
The limit is 10.
Is that 2,500, right?
Yes.
250 people?
Yes.
Day in and day
And
out.
I remember when I was working with Gordy King, he was the main deckhand, I was the second deckhand and stuff. Our deal was to maintain all the stuff on the boat, help people tie their lines, help clean fish, pick up all the trash, and then we wash down the barges with fire hoses. We had a big old fire hose, like a regulation fire hose, with that suicide nozzle on there where you couldn't control it, and the fire pump was about that big. And you'd wash down all the stuff, and you had to pick up all the trash. And I remember one time when I was working on the barges back in the old days, they instructed me to put the trash in plastic bags and throw them over the side when everybody got off the boat, and you'd see the trash. Well, I put up with that for about one day. I said, nah, this ain't happening anymore. We are going to take that trash and we're going to throw it in the trash containers. Well, you mean we're going to have to throw our trash in those containers over by the land, where everybody else does? I said, yeah, we're not throwing any more stuff over the barge, And they argued with me. And then finally, after I called the boss, the owner, I said, do you know they're dumping trash off of here? He says, yeah, they've been doing that for years. We're not going to do that anymore. We're going to have to come up with the money. I said, I don't care if I have to pay, but we're going to throw that in the garbage container, So we had a special trip where the barge boat would take the trash in there. So this one year on the sablefish, that's when we came up with the 10 cents a fish, But I remember I would get on the barge. At first we could handle it, because it was a lot of fish cleaning. Oh yeah, and we only had 2 deckhands. And where I was on the board, I was using a 6-inch boning knife, Forstner. And I'd buy those by the six at a time at the butcher shop. I would be filleting fish many times. We got on the barge at 6, and I would not stop. I started cleaning fish at 7, and I did not have lunch. I'd take a 15-minute break to hydrate, and then just kind of stretch out and stuff. And then I worked from 4:30, and then Barney kind of took over and stuff. But Gordy used to say, okay, we're going to start cleaning the boat now. I'm stop fish cleaning. So I told people, I said, if you want me to clean any more fish, it's going to be 20 cents a fish now. Because we're done. We can't clean anymore. We're exhausted, No problem. So for that 1 hour, it was double time,
Yeah.
But we cleaned. I think that bite lasted it had to be 2 months. Limits night and day. The barge boat used to run like every hour and a half hour. But at nighttime, you'd run from 6 to midnight. And then it would be one trip from midnight to 6 o'clock in the morning. They had to make a special circumstances for like a month because the blackcods were biting so good that they'd come out every half hour. 10 people would get off the boat, 10 people would get back on again. They would charge them like, I think it was, I don't even know, was it $5 or $7?
It was like $5 or $7 bucks.
But people didn't care. If they could come out for 1 hour and catch a limit of sable, that's all they wanted. And they'd stay on there to just get their fish clean and be done. And But you could catch them on. That's when we all. Back in the day, Redondo, we used to fish with the spotted bay bass, but we all fished with the worm hooks, worms and stuff like that. So they're fishing worms for the sables, the smaller 1.5, 2 pounders, and then halfway down they'd fish with a sinker, and then if you really wanted the big ones, you'd fish with an 8-ounce sinker and a treble hook and a slab of the belly from the sablefish, and you catch the 7, 8 pounders. So they were top to bottom sablefish. And there would be times where you'd be fishing, and you could see them swimming around the whole barge, thousands of them. And then no one really knew what they tasted like. So the bait boat, Jean, she was the wife of the bait boat skipper. So she would deep fry these things, and the Japanese batter, and then she did, panko, and then what's the white stuff? Tempura.
Yeah.
So she'd do tempura, she'd do panko, and then she'd do regular flour. And that would be the once in a while we'd have the fish fry special, like 2 or 3 times a week.
How was it?
You get a whole plate of stable, and it was very good.
I bet it is.
It's a cod. It's a cod that's more oily, like a true cod. The fillet is, it's long fillets like a whitefish, but the texture is not as coarse. But when it flakes off, it's like the sheephead, but a little bit less. And it was just like, I'll never forget that. I mean, I was able to save enough money to buy 2 Schwinn Continental bicycles for me and my girlfriend. I think I bought her a Raleigh Sport. Bought a Schwinn Continental, and I saved enough money to where I was 16. I bought a Toyota in '77 that I could save it from that money from them sablefish. I paid cash for it, $4,200 for a truck out the door with everything. And just some crazy
That's
fish.
amazing.
Yeah.
Did you guys ever catch like tuna or yellowtail? Or anything?
Yes, we had many days on the barge. There'd be certain times a year when the bait barge would come alongside the new Sunbeam, and as you're dumping bait, I would tell my cousin, okay, I want you to put a chrome sinker on there, and I want you to dump right behind the wake of the bait boat, and just hold it in gear, and let it about 20 feet down, and if you feel any kind of and what would happen is the tuna come up, and they lift up your sinker. And so you just slowly put in gear, hook them, and then try to walk your way away from the bait boat. Just kind of slowly maneuver that fish up. And we didn't catch a lot of tuna. We hooked a lot of tuna. I think one of our best days is that we caught 16. And honest to God, I'll bet you we went through 100 fish. Because you couldn't get them in the nets. So finally, you just have to keep wearing that fish out. Because you couldn't gaff them. They were impossible to gaff. Because we didn't have a small enough hook. But you can get them in that little landing net and get them there. And then sometimes we use that grappling hook. We get a small grappling hook on there with that barb on there, and that would work. But we had days fishing yellowtail. Back in the day when I learned how to fish yo-yo iron, that's what I learned it on the barge. You could catch after sundown, or right before sundown when we got all done cleaning the fish, you could yo-yo. We're in 150 feet of water, and no one really knew how to do it. One of the skippers on the half table said, dude, have you ever tried yo-yo fishing there? There's got to be some yellowtail around there. We had a couple of days where we get 8 or 10 yellowtail on the yo-yo. And then we had days too where before the boat got there, you had no bait, so we catch greenback mackerels. And that's when I learned how to use strip bait. So you needed a longer rod with a jig master with 40, and you'd get a whole chunk of mackerel. First you'd start off with, you'd put a mackerel on there, and you'd hook it with a treble hook. You'd cast it out there, and you wind it in as best you can, and those yellowtail would come running up there like that. And they'd come right to the side of the boat, and they're like this, swimming around again, and then they'd slowly swim out. You'd throw that mackerel out there again, but it was hard to hook them on the mackerel. So I do that about 6 or 8 times, and then my buddy, Joe Schilling, told me about fishing the cut bait. So after about the 4th time, you'd throw that cut bait out there, like that perfect size, and they just inhale it. And you hang them on that treble and you could wind it in. But then later on, as I learned how to fish better, I could make that mackerel work. But right when the bait barge didn't get there, those fish were stupid. They want to eat anything. And then we used to fish mackerel a lot all the time. So you always have some cut bait to go by there.
What about like sand bass and barracuda? Did that ever happen on the barge?
We had days, I remember, we were close to a spot called the Quartz Canyon or something. There was like an area that was a bubble hole that wasn't far from where they'd anchor the barges. And periodically and monthly, they'd anchor the barge out in different places, to kind of give people a different kind of fishing and stuff. Well, every once in a while, you'd see bubbles coming up like crazy. And that particular one wasn't sand bass. These were Spanish mackerel. And I'd say they averaged a good 3 to 4 pound average. And we used to, yeah, they're fun. And we used to,
Good eating.
they're very good eating. The Spanish mackerel is your albacore with a little bit darker, browner meat, with the same flavor. Very good eating fish. But the problem is when you catch them, they have these bubbles in them. So if you gaff them, their stomach just explodes. So you got to be careful when you land them. And another thing is when you bring them up, that their mouth comes off. They have like a little
Yeah, you
real
can
soft
pull that
mouth.
hook really
Yeah.
easy, right?
So we actually made some handy dandies out of 40-pound test with just 2 hooks on it. So you can only catch 2 at a time. Because many times, if you had 5 hooks on that handy dandy, you got 5 3-pound, 4-pound Spanish mackerel on there. And like you said, you'd see them coming. There'd be all these bubbles, and you'd cast. And it was instant limits of but you know, the limits were vague in those days, you know, so you really didn't know what you catch. And a lot of people didn't know they taste good. Till one day, let's cook one on the barge one time. And it's like, oh my gosh, these things are to die for. And it didn't happen very often, but when it happened, they were there. And then the sand bass would come in too. You know, you'd have days, we didn't catch, 500 or 600 sand bass, but we'd have 100 fish days, you know. If you were fishing with a single hook and worked at it, you could catch 4 or 5. And then you catch 4 or 5 Johnny bass. And then you could catch bonita all day long. And the hot jig in them days was called the boom boom jig. And it was a jig that looked just like a fish, and we painted it with our spray paint, and it was made out of lead. And what's cool is you could bend it a little bit, you'd cast it out there, or a chrome sinker with a treble hook on it. And you could catch 15, 20 bonita if you worked at it, no problem all day long. And I'd say a good 5-pound average.
What about rockfish? You know, Eddie, I remember fishing the Mondstadt Pier.
Yep.
And there was a guy on the end of it, some old guy. Now I'm the old guy, but some old guy, and he would like make this long cast, wind in a nice big boccaccio off the freaking pier.
Yeah.
Did you guys get?
I don't remember much of that at the pier, but at Redondo, there were certain times a year you would get a 3-month bite of boccaccio, Johnny bass, whitefish, at least 15 different species of cod. And like all you had, everybody who had the chrome sinker and the single hook, they caught their limit no problem. And that was 15 in the day. So that 15 of those rock cod, they weren't big like he's saying there. They were like a pound and a half, the perfect pound and a half size. I forget what they called that. There was a name for the group though. It was a perfect size.
Steamer size.
Yeah, perfect for the Korean barbecue. The Korean, they'd put it in that brown sauce, or they'd deep fry it, or they'd steam it. They had 3 or 4 different ways. And that's where I learned about the importance of utilizing all the different parts of that fish. Back in the old days, we just filleted everything. But man, as you got to learn the different people, different cultures, they taught you how to eat the belly section, how to eat the gills, how to eat the collar, the cods, the cheeks on the cods, on the cow cods. But and then we'd had mornings where we didn't get any bait, and then it seems like we get some squid or something, and then everybody fished for the rockfish that day, And it was some good times. But then later on, as everything got widened out. It was brutal times. Everything kind of took it. You can even catch some mackerels in the day. And I forgot about mackerel. You catch all the mackerel you want at Little Island.
And they were big.
Yeah, they were blues. They didn't call them greenbacks. They called them blues because they were average at least 2-pounders. And you had some. I swear, you catch them at Redondo. You thought it was a bonita. 4-pound greenback mackerels. I mean, you catch them on Rapala, you'd just be shocked.
I remember a lot of guys would go out there with those balloons and fish sharks.
Yeah, that was another thing. Another thing, I used to work on the barge. We had shark night, and like you said, you could catch on average 50 to 80 sharks a night.
Blue sharks?
Blue sharks, brown sharks. I didn't know what those brown sharks work. I never realized.
Supers, maybe?
But it's a brown shark that looks similar to a blue
Are you
shark.
talking about like brown sharks that you see down around the lower island?
I'm pretty sure that's what they were because
Yeah.
when I was a kid, before that, I used to go out in the barge when I was like 5, 6 years old, and they had research guys that they do all kinds of experiments and check them and stuff. And it wasn't a blue shark, but it wasn't a smooth hound. It was more of a thicker body, not like a smooth hound, but more like a brown shark.
Well, these fish are feeding on the surface too, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And we'd
So
have
that sounds
guys.
like a brown.
We had guys. The problem with the shark fishermen, it's like the bikers. They are a group of rowdies that, oh man, they don't.
Oh, that's
So
so true.
it's a
different
group of
breed.
guys, a different breed. Everyone's got the knife strapped on there, and the hot ticket was a balloon with a hole beneath the head with the guts hanging out with a hook through the nose. You'd watch that balloon take off, and you'd hook them. And we caught blue sharks. I remember we caught several blue sharks, 6, 7, 8 feet long, not uncommon. But the biggest one we ever caught, I think, was 11 feet long, and I measured it. It was 11 foot long blue shark. And I remember Jerry Purcell had to fix one of the tires where the boats tie up to, and he has this big old pipe wrench in his hand, you know, and he's tightening down that pipe wrench, and I'm watching this giant 11-foot blue shark swim right next to him, and we didn't say a word and swim right away. Okay, Jerry, come on in. I think we're done now. And then that night they caught that sucker, you know.
Nice.
And I don't remember ever catching any white sharks, but we did catch some threshers, we did catch the browns, and we did catch a ton of blues. But there was many nights you caught hundreds of sharks, or 50, 60, 80. And they used to hang them with a rope by the tail. And that's a trick with a shark is what you want to do is, the easiest way to control a shark is get your line around the leader and just tie the tail off and hang them. And it's over with. You don't have to get
Any
them up.
makos?
We catch makos too. You didn't catch a whole bunch. Well, we had days though you catch 4 or 5.
You probably remember those days when you were catching all those blue sharks. If you went on the pursuit to Catalina, you could freaking walk on them.
Yes.
Right?
And the sunfish.
Yeah.
I remember my dad's boat. He had a boat. It was a Bryant. It had 2 outboards on it. And there'd be times where there's so many sunfish out there that if you didn't turn your engine off, you ran over sunfish. There were schools of hundreds of them, and it'd lift up your outboard when you'd bump them. And the thing is, that's the curse. You don't want to kill a sunfish.
Yeah, everybody used to say that was bad luck.
Yes, and I
remember
believe
Rick
it.
Effinger saying that.
If you're on my boat, you are not going to hurt a sunfish ever. I don't care what it is. Do not hurt that thing. And there was many, many times, you didn't see a whole bunch of them, but there was many that, to me, they had to be 600 to 800 pounds. They were as wide. They were as wide as right here. And that fin stuck up that far. They'd just be out there puzzling. Yeah. And the first time you see one, you go, man, that is the weirdest looking fish. It looks just like somebody cut that sucker in half, like SpongeBob cut him in half, and then he tapered him up. Didn't taper him up very good. But I remember my dad's boat heading to Catalina, man. Schools of thousands. And like, if you wanted to fish blue sharks, though, you could catch blue sharks all day long if you wanted. And I'm sad to say they wasted a lot of blue sharks just for their
Very
jaws.
right?
No, I think that's the only shark you can't eat.
Yeah.
I don't know.
They even smelled bad.
Yeah, they definitely have a real high ammonia smell.
Yeah.
But I've had some of my Samoan buddies. They soak them in milk, and they love them.
Yeah. Somebody who did that. I think Sean Morgan told me to do it, and I did it, and
Yeah.
it actually was okay.
Because I eat those slime eels, so I mean they make those things taste good.
Slime eels are good, aren't they?
Yep, that's
yeah.
a big market in Korea.
Hagfish, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
hagfish. And have you ever seen a slime eel?
Yeah.
You put a slime eel in a 5-gallon bucket, and he will slime that entire bucket by himself. It's that thick in there. You pretty much just better cut off whatever you got. You don't want to touch them. You get that slime on there, and it gets sticky. And as you're rubbing it off, it turns white, and it sticks to you. It's worse than barracuda, 10 times worse than barracuda. You can't get it off your hands.